Welcome to the webinar today. We're going to be talking about PMO roadmaps. Now, as you know, as we go through the go through the webinar today, we often have a chat. So you'll see if you open your chat box open, you have the opportunity to join in, pass comments, ask any questions. And as we go through the session, I'll be keeping an eye on that. But we've also got some other guys from the office. There's Lindsay on straight away. A very wet, snowy Manchester. It must be kind of cold in Manchester. It's not quite snowy today here where I am, but there we go. So yes, so do open your chat window and as we go through this session, we'll keep an eye on what's in there. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Eileen Roden. I'm one of the directors of PMO Learn, and also one of the directors and co-founders of House of PMO. And you'll find that a lot of the theory that we're talking about here in the webinar is based on the work that we've done at the House of PMO around the competency framework, around the service catalogue, that provides the basis for a lot of our House of PMO certification. So some of you might kind of recognise some of the terminology that we use. But that's where the main core of that information comes from, which for those of you who know the House of PMO, you'll know that comes from real life practitioners and what's happening in PMOs up and down the country and across the globe. We have an international input into the work that we do. So for those of you perhaps who don't know PMO Learning and have not kind of come across us before, Lindsay and I established PMO Learning because we wanted an organisation that was purely focused on those people who work in and around a PMO. So you'll find that the people who get involved in our training are all proper PMO people. They may have got some project management experience, but their first love and their main role either is and continues to be or was working in the PMO. So today we're going to talk about the PMO roadmap. I'm going to break the session up into 3 different sections. I'm going to try and do the first bit relatively quickly, so you may have to kind of come back and listen to some of that again. I'm going to be talking about some concepts where we've got some other previous webinars and Lindsay and Rachel put some links in to provide some further information and further reading on some of the concepts that feed into the roadmap. And then I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail about actually building your initial roadmap. And then I'm going on to about maintaining your PMO roadmap, make sure that it's current. So let's start with the big picture and what the big picture is all around. And I just really kind of want to kind of set the bar just to get us clear about what we mean by PMO, because there are often questions about, you know, kind of how big does my PMO need to be? What's involved in the PMO? What do you mean by a PMO? So I just want to be clear, and we've taken this, as I said, the definition from the House of PMO, that when we're talking about a PMO and doing a roadmap for a PMO, we're talking about any individual team, department, or division that supports project program and portfolio management. So it could be perfectly legitimate. You are going to be you're the only person in your individual PMO. We often call those a POO or PMO of one. And you can quite legitimately have a roadmap where you are kind of demonstrating to your customers, to your sponsor, how your PMO is going to continue to contribute to the organization over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. In the same way, if you're part of a large PMO where it's a division and you've got multiple officers, you may have a high-level roadmap for the organizations PMOs, but you may have more detailed ones for each PMO, each departmental PMO or portfolio office or program office, depending on how that organization is set up. So that's where we're coming from when we're talking about a PMO. So any size works for us, and we're happy to kind of that the theory applies to any size PMO wherever you sit within the organization. So just need to kind of take a step back. And interestingly, we've been working with a couple of organizations recently and trying to help them pull together and set their PMO up. And what it has reaffirmed is that unless you've got some of the basics in place, it becomes very difficult to actually kind of do a development plan for the PMO and look at how your PMO is going to demonstrate its value to the organization and understand where it's going to add value to the organization and how it's going to contribute. So I'm just going to talk through, as I said, some of the kind of the things that kind of sit behind um, pulling together your roadmap. So the first thing is to understand that we talk about this at an organizational level when the PMO director and the PMO stakeholders, but it could actually be at a PMO manager level and some more local stakeholders. But the idea is that we understand why the PMO has been set up in the first place. What is the expectation that the PMO is going to be doing, and how's it going to be making a difference to the delivery of projects and programs across the organization? And we haven't got any preconceived ideas that it's about improving project management or it's about supporting sponsors or supporting senior management in the decisions on which projects to approve. It could be any or all of those. And what we've learned and experience has shown us is that every PMO has its own reason for being put into place. Now, what we often find is sometimes that isn't articulated particularly well. And it's definitely worth, as a PMO manager, as a PMO director, having an understanding to what is it you want this PMO to be able to do. And we agree a vision for the PMO. And in what it should be ideally is a link to the corporate vision and strategy. Now, again, that's a huge assumption that our organization has got a corporate vision and strategy, but we need to have that kind of shared understanding of where the PMO is going to be. And then what we do is we decide on what our services are going to be, how we're going to deliver services to the organization that will deliver the vision in order to kind of achieve what's been set up. Now, as I said, that might be broken down across multiple PMOs or single PMOs, but that's really the kind of the fundamental role or the fundamental view that if we want to kind of add value, we need to make sure what we've been set up to do and we're aligned to the corporate vision and strategy, and we are delivering a set of services in order to deliver that. So that's, as I said, fundamental. It's covered in all of our House of PMO certifications. Now, what we did last year, we did some work around actually kind of developing something called a PMO canvas, and said, actually, if we really want to understand the PMO business model and how that sits, it's really useful to put a PMO canvas in place. You'll see there's 9 interrelated elements that are really key to provide this visual framework of describing the business model that we're going to be using from our PMO, from who the sponsor is, kind of, and who the stakeholders are, what they're after, some OKRs, so objectives and key results, and we're going to come back to that, our services, the governance structure, how it's going to be paid, what reporting is going to be required, the skills and resources that are required in order to be able to do all that within the PMO. And an integral part of the PMO canvas is the actual kind of roadmap for the PMO. So it kind of, that's where it sits. So we understand what we're about. We pull together an understanding and develop our PMO canvas. And as we go through the building of that, the expectation is that we will have a roadmap to demonstrate how we're going to do the delivery. So hopefully that kind of just puts it in a little bit more context. Now, one of the things that we also have as an underlying concept is that from a PMO perspective, we are going to be, as a director or PMO manager, that we're actually going to be monitoring our PMO to ensure that it is performing as expected. And therefore, what we need to be clear about is what the metrics are that we're going to have around our particular PMO. So what we do is we have our understanding about what the PMO vision is. We understand what our PMO objectives is, and we have this concept of key results areas. So how are we going to be able to demonstrate that we're actually achieving what we've set out to achieve? and for all of the services that we deliver, are those services performing to the key performance indicator? So again, we've got that kind of, we understand what our contribution is to the organization metrics. We have some smart objectives that are smart. And as I say, we have some metrics around each of the individual services to demonstrate those services are delivering. So in order, although we don't have these as we are setting up our first roadmap, as we go through developing the roadmap, the idea is that we can kind of demonstrate we're making some progress along the roadmap and we're ready to make the next few steps. So when I talk about some of the metrics later on, this is the model that underpins that. So let's go now. We're going to go step through now in terms of kind of building your PMO roadmap. So it's worth understanding what a roadmap actually is and what it's for. And the definition that we again have taken is it's a plan or strategy intended to achieve a particular goal. So the idea is that we're establishing a PMO and we're going to have this roadmap that's going to say this is what our PMO is going to do. Again, it might have a horizon of a 3-month or a 6-month or a 9-month, or even a kind of a 2-year or 5-year horizon to support the organization's strategy. Now, what we recognize is that PMOs don't just kind of, much as we might like them to, they don't kind of magically appear overnight and be everything we need them to be. We have this concept of a PMO life cycle where we have to go through a period of setup, and then we run it, and we may need to kind of transform that to be something different as we introduce new services and shut some services off. And for some PMOs, actually, we'll actually get to close them down. And there's lots of philosophical arguments about kind of whether PMOs shut down and what that means. But if I'm set up a PMO for a project or a large transitional program for the organization, I'm going to kind of set that PMO up. I'm going to run some services for a period of time. I'm then going to kind of, as the program progresses, I might introduce some new services. I might kind of change the size and structure of the PMO while that program is in existence. And when we get to the end of the program, I'm actually going to close that PMO down. So the PMO will go through that life cycle. And as part of that life cycle, both in the setup, run, and transform, what is really important is that we have ongoing stakeholder engagement. So we understand where we currently are with our roadmap and what that's going to look like in the future. Again, we've talked about performance management. And just because we've got it set up doesn't mean we're just kind of sitting twiddling our thumbs and go, yes, we can crank the handle now. What we should also recognize is that when we're in that kind of run bit, in that run part of the life cycle, we're actually still striving for continuous improvement. So we shouldn't just kind of say, set the services up, get all of the things in place. What we need to recognize is that actually we still might do some tweaks of some services. We might change them slightly. Fundamentally, we're still doing the same services, but we may kind of do some continuous improvement to get the results that we're hoping for by the delivery of those services. So that's the whole kind of concept of the PMO life cycle. So essentially, as we're setting the PMO up right from the very beginning, we have our initial PMO roadmap. And then as we run and we go through the transform, then actually our PMO roadmap would kind of evolve and change. We'd have extra things put on that. And then essentially we'd kind of close our PMO. We would have the roadmap would come to a very kind of a very abrupt end to say that the PMO no longer is required. So what we're going to do is look at kind of the structure of a PMO, and we'll understand how that works through a setup, a run, and transform. I'm not going to cover off the close, though I'll touch on it a little bit as we go through the session. So let's have a look at a roadmap, and I never know what these kind of diagrams are called, and you'll see it as it kind of comes to life, and somebody might be able to kind of add it into chat. So this is a picture of a road map, not looking particularly pretty at this point. But the idea is a blob. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, three blobs, Eva, two blobs and a bit of black. So the idea is that the kind of the black section and the red section and then the burgundy section is a kind of a bit of a timeline. And the idea is that the black represents those activities that we're going to do now as we kind of move into the future, what we're going to do next, and as we kind of get to that top right-hand corner, what we're going to do later on. Now, and very often when we do a roadmap, we can just have now, next, and later. We don't necessarily have to have, kind of this is what we're doing on the 1st of January, this is what we're doing on the 1st of March, this is what we're doing on the 1st of July. You legitimately can have now, next, and later, depending on how regimented you're being in terms of planning the activity that's going to be involved in the setup and transformation of your PMO. And again, what some people do and what we'll talk about as we go through the review and update of the roadmap is we often might see the now and the next as sprints. We might kind of set up our PMO in an iterative way and say, so the now things we're going to do through our first sprint, the next is going to be our second sprint, and perhaps later is going to be a whole load of other things that are going to be further on down the line. So how you position things on this kind of now, next, and later, and the kind of how regimented you want to be is down to your own personal preference. Just bear in mind that this roadmap is usually a really good visual to share with your stakeholders, and also recognize that your next and your later may also change as you proceed through delivering your roadmap, and your stakeholders might become more educated. They might understand a bit more about what they can expect from the PMO. They might see different business priorities, and therefore the kind of the next and the later of that roadmap may well change as we go through. Now, we could get very precious about it and put it under strict change control and versioned, but dated as a minimum is really kind of where we would want to be. It is often that a PMO will have more than one objectives. And so what we will do is we will split the now, next, and later into the different objectives, so we can see for each of those kind of time periods what we're going to be doing to be driving the objectives of the PMO. Okay. What I'm going to work on today is I give you an example of just one single objective, but then you can apply that to as many objectives of the PMO that you have in your PMO. Now, I'm just curious for those of you who are sitting on the webinar, and there's quite a few out there, how many of you have got defined objectives, agreed objectives with your sponsor and stakeholders of your PMO? I'm just curious as to kind of whether this is a real thing out for you there. Oh, that's great. Look at that. We've got some yeses, some great. So interesting. I know we did some work recently, and trying to work with some PMOs to try and get some really meaningful objectives that we can do something with is not an insignificant piece of work. So having that before we start is always helpful. It's reassuring to have all of those yeses. So let me just give you a little scenario, and we'll talk about how it might play out in developing a roadmap. So what we've got a PMO here. Look at all of those cheerful people working in a PMO. It's a small team of 3. They're going to set up a program level PMO, and they have been asked to ensure that we've got consistent and effective processes are going to be used across the program. And essentially what they've done is they've done a P3M3 assessment, and they've taken the 7 dimensions of that P3M3 assessment, which are in relation to risk management, benefits management, organizational governance, management control, stakeholder engagement, resource management, and financial management. Now, I'm not going to kind of test you on that, but those are the 7 perspectives. Okay. And what we're going to talk about is particularly is the risk perspective. So they would potentially have the diagram split into 7 and how they were going to demonstrate for all of those 7 objectives. But let's just have a look at the risk objectives. So what that objective is they're going to ensure consistent and effective risk management processes are embedded across the program. Now that's I would say a relatively smart objective. So we do that for the life of the program. Now, what we've got under that are some key results areas. So again, we've got there's another webinar available that'll take you through kind of the building of these kind of key results areas. But what we've said is that we want to be able to demonstrate that we've achieved our objective. So how can we tell that we're going to have those the risk processes embedded across the program? And what we've come up with kind of five key results areas that would say, yep, absolutely. If those 5 things are in place, then that's a good indication that we've got effective risk management processes. So we talk about all the project managers and team members have been trained. We've got a risk register using the standard template. The risk registers are updated on a regular basis. They're escalated and discussed at program board, because that means it's not just embedded in the individual programs, but it's actually right up to program board. And all of the risks have an agreed response and a mitigation plan where appropriate. Now, I suspect there's a lot of organizations that if they could tick all of those 5 boxes around risk management for all of their programs and projects, they'd be really happy. So part of the role of the PMO is for us to be able to do that. Think contextually, just for this particular scenario, they have had a recent P3M3 assessment, as I said, and they've come out with a risk level of 1, which basically means that they recognize that risk management is important to the delivery of projects and programs, and they want to do some work on it, but actually we've got very little in terms of risk management in place. So from the PMO perspective, we're actually kind of starting from quite a low bar. So essentially we may want to have to start from scratch and establishing and ensuring risk management is known and understood across the program. So the idea is what we do is we take each of those objectives, and what we do is we decide on what services do we need to put in place in order to be able to achieve and demonstrate those key results areas and therefore achieve our objectives. And so what we're trying to identify is kind of what services are we going to undertake. Now, I'm just put a picture up there of the PMO service catalogue. If you have not seen the PMO service catalogue, again, this is another House of PMO publication, initially written by Stuart Dixon, but one that the House of PMO is currently working through. And I've picked some examples from there to demonstrate how that can be used then to kind of pick the services that we're going to use in this particular PMO. So what we've go the right way. What we've identified is there are 7 key PMO services that we think it's important for the PMO to deliver. Now, what we often see in PMOs is somebody can say, well, yes, I think these are the services we need to provide as a PMO around risk management. But to go one step further, it becomes really important for us to recognize how each service aligns to each individual key results area. So we can do that we understand how that service is actually going to contribute to what we're trying to do as a PMO. So let's just quickly go through them. So one of the services that we're going to deliver is to train the risk management framework. So hopefully if we do that, we'll be able to achieve that all project manager and project team members have actually been trained. We're going to make sure that all of the programs have a risk register using a standard template. So part of that is the service we're going to develop and maintain, the risk management framework. Now, an interesting one here to think about is that we may not necessarily be the custodians of the risk management framework for the whole of the organization, but we need to understand what the risk management framework is for our particular program. So what that might entail is actually taking the corporate risk management processes and say, how do we need to tailor it for our program? And the answer might be not at all. We're going to use it as standard, but it may mean just something quite as small as, well, actually, we're going to have the risk template is going to have our program's logo on it. We may have our own definitions of high, medium, and low. We may define what our reporting might be. So we may have to do some tailoring, but that's essentially a service we're going to provide to get us where we've got a standard risk template. And that's what's been trained out to the people who are going to be working on this program. So we're going to actually deliver the service where we're going to maintain the risk register. So potentially the projects and the program will be given a PMO administrator or a PMO analyst. And part of their role is actually going to be maintaining the risk register on behalf of the project and program managers. And what we're also going to do is we're going to have potentially some assurance activities to monitor the risk register to make sure that yes, we're still using the standard template. Yes, that all of the risks are updated on a regular basis, and we're going to make sure that we've got the responses. Okay. So again, from an escalation, what we may well be involved with in terms of the reporting and making sure that the risks that are on the project registers, anything that might need to be a program level risk, will be escalated up to the program board. So part of our role is to going to be make sure of that kind of efficient flow of information. And then finally, we're going to again do that monitor the risk register. We may actually kind of facilitate some independent workshops, but we're also going to do again some further assurance activities to ensure that the risk mitigations are appropriate and are having the right impact on the risks that we've got in the organization. So we've got a direct correlation between the services that we're hoping to provide in this PMO to the key results areas. And once we've got an idea of those services, we can then start populating our roadmap. Now, what I'm going to talk about here, when we've kind of first put this together, because we're essentially kind of got a new PMO, we're essentially kind of starting from scratch. So it makes sense. Well, actually, let's work out what the risk management framework actually is and then train that out. Make sure we kind of facilitate some workshops so everybody understands what that works. And from a PMO perspective, we know that when projects are set up, they've got the right risk register maintained. We'll set up the service to maintain risk registers and make sure we've got the PMO analysts, the PMO administrators in place to be able to do that, and then make sure that that information flows up to the program board. And then later on, we'll get to monitor the risk register and review the effectiveness as risk mitigation. So if I was doing a first pass of the roadmap, I would be saying to my customers, I'd be saying to the program manager and the program director, essentially, this is the order of services that would make sense to implement them. Because again, what we don't want to do is kind of switch on all of those 7 services overnight, because actually we want to kind of make sure that they're appropriate and they're kind of just too much to do all in one way. So the kind of the roadmap will, as I said, is that kind of natural kind of view of kind of where the services might be. And again, as I think it's Ian mentioned there in the chat, they never get away without having any dates on the roadmap. So we may well have some kind of prospective dates. And again, depending on whether you're taking a kind of a waterfall or agile approach, what you might want to do is say, we're going to do the now activities in the first 3 or 4 weeks, then the next in the next 3 or 4 weeks and later, or you might have kind of specific dates on all of those activities that you're talking about. So that's the first pass, and that kind of looks pretty great, and everybody goes, well, that's a great kind of pictorial view. From a PMO manager's perspective, though, what we need to do before we kind of commit to the real dates is understand the work that's going to be involved in setting up any of those services. So what we need to think about is the PMO service life cycle that sits within the PMO life cycle. So even though we may have run this service before, we still need to establish the service in our PMO. And then when that service has been set up and operational, we'll run that service, and at some point we'll shut that service down. So again, we're just kind of following that, kind of making sure that we give enough time and enough formality and enough structure to make sure we've set that service up correctly, which is all of the kind of the processes that sit behind that. And what we want to behind that is make sure we've got the right documentation. Now, I know we have great fun in terms of kind of how much documentation is the right level of documentation, but we do want to make sure that whatever service that we are delivering from our PMO, that we understand why we're delivering that service in the first place, and who it's applicable for, and making sure that kind of people understand the terms of engagement. So we have an overall PMO service strategy. We will have a service catalogue, and in terms of saying these are the services that we're going to deliver. And we're also going to have the PMO operations handbook, which is the documentation that is required in order to run that service. So let me just give you a couple of examples of what that looked like. So if the PMO service strategy will be, we have an organizational wide risk management framework. It will be tailored for any programs, but the fundamentals and the structure of the framework will remain the same. In this PMO service catalogue, we would define the service about, we will develop and maintain the PMO, the risk management framework. It will in there document that it'll be available 24/7 via a SharePoint site, and that there's an expectation that all project and program managers will follow that framework on the programs that it's used for. However, when it comes to the PMO operations handbook, that's the internal document to the PMO, which says, well, actually what we'll have is that we'll have details of kind of how the version control is undertaken, so we can kind of manage the work internally to the PMO. So again, we just have to be very clear about what we don't want to do is just agree a whole load of services without understanding all of the work that's involved in order to set those services up. And also understand the roles that are required in order to be able to manage that service effectively. Now, again, we look at a service owner, a service manager, and a service operative. And I'm not going to kind of a great level of detail, only to say that actually, you know, kind of this could still be a single person who's doing all of this activity. And again, one of the things that we would be using is the competency framework to understand the knowledge, skills, and behaviors we would need to undertake in order to be able to deliver each of the services. And then the final kind of thing before we go back to kind of looking at what we build up in the roadmap is just a quick word of warning in terms of understanding what we can actually do. Now, I can imagine a few of you are thinking is, Aileen, we came to listen about how to build a roadmap up. What I didn't come to do is kind of learn about a whole load of bureaucracy about what sits behind actually kind of setting the PMO up and demonstrating to our customers what we're going to deliver. But I think it's really important that before we commit to a detailed roadmap, we understand the work that sits behind it. So what we're delivering is a realistic roadmap that we are confident that we can deliver to, and we understand all of the work that's going to be involved in setting these services up. So I want to go back to our roadmap. Okay. So in order to kind of to progress through this roadmap, in the first sprint, that kind of in the black area, what we're planning to do immediately, we are going to first of all set up and run the service, which is about developing and maintaining the risk management framework. That's the first piece of work. Now, that might not necessarily take us an awful long time to do, but we do need to understand we'll get the framework, we'll do some of that work, but actually what we want to do is make that a sustainable service, because essentially that service is going to run for the whole life of the program. And then once we've got that, what we're going to do is then set up and run the training program for anybody who's going to be coming onto the program. Now, when we set up this service, we've got lots of options about whether we want to run that on a weekly basis or whether we want to run that on a monthly basis. And typically when we're setting up a new PMO and we're pulling a program together, essentially we might do some kind of sheep dipping. Yes. And that's the bit we need to kind of think about, kind of when we first set that service up, that service might be kind of, we're going to run a set number of training courses around risk management, may incorporate some of the other services, but essentially that's going to be a service that's offered by the PMO. And what we're going to do is that kind of now activity is going to be undertaken as part of the establishment of the program and sits within that kind of program life cycle. So we've demonstrated kind of that's what we're going to do to kind of essentially set the PMO up in this particular area. We're going to kind of make sure we've got those two services in place. Now, that's great for our first tranche. So what our customers can see is through the next period, we're going to set up two services. We're going to set up and run those services, and we can see into the future in terms of what's going to be coming next. So this is where our roadmap needs to remain current and how it represents what we're going to be doing in the future. So what we also need to do as we're going through this first period, before we start planning the next stage in our roadmap, is understand how we track success. So we've got our risk objective to ensure we've got consistent and effective risk management, and we've got our key results areas. And one of the things that we have to do in the PMO is get used to the fact that we're not just going to be reporting on projects and the program, we're actually going to be reporting on how well our PMO is actually delivering against what we said we would deliver against. So what we're going to be doing is doing some reporting on how well we've delivered the services. So has the service been set up as we anticipated in the timelines? Have we, kind of how much effort has it taken, and did it do that? Have we got all of our documentation done? Have we engaged with all of the users? And if you remember from the metrics slide, are we delivering the service to the level of quality that is right for our particular program? So again, for one of the services we talked about delivering the training, have we delivered all of those training courses to everybody on the program? And was the training of a good enough quality that actually the people who went on the training course understand the framework and they are now able to use it in the real world? So before we kind of move ahead and plan that next sprint, we need to understand, have we delivered what we anticipated in this kind of current sprint? So some of the conversation that this kind of PMO have said, yes, we've done that. Okay. So actually, the program's just becoming online. The project managers want some time to get their projects off the ground, not potentially in a position where we're going to need the escalation. So actually what we're going to look to do in the next tranche is we're not going to do the 3 services. We're just going to set up the independent risk workshop. So the PMO again is going to provide some PMO analysts typically who will go and facilitate services, facilitate workshops for each of the projects and at program level to make sure that what we've got is a standard risk register completed. And what we'll do is we will bring on board the PMO administrators and the PMO analysts, and they will start delivering the services that is about maintaining the risk register. So as the new projects come onto the program, they'll get allocated an administrator and somebody who will be maintaining that risk register. So essentially what we're trying to do now is getting to some kind of rhythm where we're delivering the risk workshops and we're maintaining the risk register on behalf of the projects. So now what we've got is we've got 4 services established on our particular program. And again, we would go through that process of doing the assessment before we go forward into what might be the next tranche of activities, the next set of services. So the next set of services that we want to do, the next step of the roadmap, will be to set up the escalation to the program board. And now, because we're going to be kind of putting that escalation and reporting in place, we're going to also set up that service about monitoring the risk register. Now, the interesting bit here is that what might have happened, and this is where we can show that our roadmap continues to be fed by the stakeholders and the performance of our PMO, is that what's been decided because of the cost and the work involved, that actually we've decided we're going to change the service of maintaining the risk register. So you'll recognize that as we kind of started introducing the service of maintaining the risk register, then what was happening is that we would allocate a PMO analyst and a PMO administrator in order to do that for each of the projects. Now, what's happened as we've been tracking against our key results areas is what we've identified is that actually the project managers have really bought into the risk management framework. And it's been identified that actually it is no longer cost effective for us to provide an analyst or an administrator for every single project. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to close that service down. That service has delivered its value by making sure everybody is doing that consistently, but to ensure that we maintain those statistics and we maintain the objective of ensuring we've got consistent and effective risk processes across the program, we're now going to, we've now got the service of monitoring the risk register switched on instead. So we've switched one service off, but we're going to go and undertake that, monitor the risk register to make sure that the risk managers or the project managers are maintaining that risk register to achieve the consistency that we expected. And so what we end up in our roadmap is, and again, you don't necessarily just need to have the 3 blobs. We'll use the technical term that Lindsay suggested. So rather than just kind of having those 3 blobs, what you may have is kind of some versions, and you can see as you've gone through how your roadmap has been set up and run some services through each tranche, but how some services will continue to exist through the life of the PMO, and some of those services will be switched off and updated as we progress through that roadmap. And essentially what your roadmap will have at any time is an understanding of what's currently in existence, what's going to be developed as we kind of go through that, but essentially what's on the backlog, what's in that kind of later blob in terms of the other services that we develop. I think the interesting thing from the roadmap's perspective is how detailed a plan you may have around behind your roadmap, which is how you as a PMO manager or a PMO analyst are managing the development and the implementation of the services to support this roadmap. And very often that is a much more detailed document, and the roadmap is a visual representation of how you're switching on and switching off services to support the program or organization that you've got your roadmap for. Again, worked with an organization where, so I've just used kind of grey for run services and orange for those that are going through setup. I had a work with a PMO that used red, amber, and green to demonstrate which services were running, which ones were kind of in the processes of being set up, and the red ones were actually kind of services that were on the backlog that had not necessarily had some approval that that service was going to be delivered, but potentially was going to be reviewed with stakeholders on a regular basis. In practice, your roadmap may not look hugely dynamic. Anybody want to suggest how often the roadmap might be updated if you're at a program or an enterprise level PMO? What might you suggest as a regular interval to update that? It's almost as if I'd prompted you, Elaine, yeah? So if you've got a project office and you're supporting a project, you might want to do that on a monthly basis. But typically, quarterly would be a good time because it then allows you to ensure that you've got all of your metrics in place to report on the impact of the services that you're delivering to ensure that your PMO was in a position to introduce the next set of services, but also then make sure that you've got the time and commitment to actually kind of set up those services. One of the things that we find is when people are putting the roadmap together, they don't necessarily put in sufficient time to set those services up and don't necessarily think about the amount of effort it's going to take to run those services once they're set up. And again, the other thing that sits alongside that, and we covered off in the PMO managers course, is recognizing that as a PMO manager, your time is not necessarily focused on delivering services yourself, but ensuring that your PMO has got the right services for your customers. So essentially, a lot of the PMO manager's time is going to be managing the work that sits behind this roadmap to make sure that they're set up, the services are set up and running in a way that your program or organization requires. Well, I'm hoping that's answered. I'm just kind of reviewing the questions that were established beforehand. There was some questions around software in terms of kind of what software might be required. Interestingly, I would absolutely condone the fact that each service setup can be seen as a small project in its own right. So you may not necessarily use your the full delivery framework, but certainly institute the best management practice around having an individual plan. So if you've got some software that supports your delivery of projects, potentially you could use that same software that you would use for any of your other projects. So Hannah's got a question there in terms of what level and type of communication engagement with stakeholders in the early phases of the roadmap. I think, Hannah, the important thing, which is why I went back to kind of some of the first principles, is really understand what your PMO is there to do. Why have you been kind of put in place? It's very easy as a PMO practitioner, a PMO professional, to look at some some textbooks and say, and the PMO service catalog is a prime example. Look, these are all of the things we can do, but not all of those services are going to be most appropriate for your organization. Not all of those services will be funded. So it's important for people to recognize that and understand is what difference are you going to make? So in this particular example, what difference can we make to risk management in this particular organization? So it's about having those conversations about what is the expectations of what impact we can have on successful delivery of a project and program, whilst recognizing that it's actually the project manager and the sponsor are accountable for its delivery. Okay.
We've got a question there. Shouldn't the PMO roadmap include other services or areas where the PMO can add value and not just focus on risk?
Oh no, no, absolutely. So what we talked about on this particular example is this PMO had seven objectives, one for each of the different dimensions of the results of the P3M3 assessment. So yes, you may have six or seven objectives around reducing the cost of delivery. And again, you would have to look at what particular services you would deliver to reduce the cost of delivery. You might have another one that might be improving the sales and capability of project and program managers across the organization. And again, you would have to look at what services that you would require. So if I go back to, let me quickly go back to the exact slide so I can show you where that is. So if we go back to slide 16 here, essentially I just looked at one particular objective, which was risk management. So depending on how many objectives you would potentially have now, next, and later for each of those other objectives. So yes, it wouldn't just be about risk management. It would be whatever is the focus of your particular PMO.
Got a nice question here about what level and type of communication stroke engagement with stakeholders would you recommend, especially in the early phases
So
of
that's
the
the question I've
roadmap?
just answered about understanding about what we're there to do and how do you think we can demonstrate that
Yeah.
we've achieved those objectives, which is our key results areas. So getting them set up is really important.
And one final question. Eileen, can you come and do all the objectives for everybody's PMOs, please? Do it over like an hour each lunchtime, and then
Well, do you know it's really interesting is we have done a piece of work where we were asked to do some work with the organization, and interestingly the biggest challenge was getting to those objectives, because it isn't just a case of deciding what services you want to deliver, it's having that alignment in terms of demonstrating it's making the difference in the areas that are important to the organization. So, although we were talking about the roadmap, those earlier steps are really critical for that roadmap to be meaningful for your organization. And it has to be linked to some metrics to say, well, actually, we've done the first bit. Is it worth doing any more services? Because if we're not making a difference with the services that we're delivering, then actually we're going to really struggle going forward.
Well, we've got a couple of minutes because we've had some questions about directly about training itself. So
Okay.
I know if we bring the roadmap to a close, but do get people asking, and if you do want to know, and if you've got your recommendations yourself, you can stick those into chat. The question there about what kind of accreditation or training would you recommend that covers all key areas of PMO, from project, program, portfolio management, and governance? I don't think it exists, but you might be able to fill somebody in on this one. It's a question from Zishan.
Yes. So in terms of the all of the things we've talked about in terms of kind of getting to a roadmap and the vision and the documentation and the rules, that's covered at different levels at the House of PMO Association, the House of PMO Association, the House of PMO accreditations. So we've got one for administrators, one for analysts, one for managers, and one for directors. Now, from a PMO learning perspective, we also, as I say, specialize in courses for PMO people. And one of the courses that we specifically do is P3 governance, so project program and portfolio governance. So there is a 2-day qualification, and that's running in
December.
December. Yes, I haven't got that. I'm sure Jen, or there we
Yeah,
go. Jen or Charles is going to come on with the date for that.
yeah.
Um, it must be the around 7th, 8th
Don't
of
know.
December.
Yeah.
It's coming up any minute now. The date will be. So yes, so no, there's a textbook which I probably have on my desk somewhere. There we go. I knew I had it somewhere. There's a textbook around governance, P3 governance, and we run the 2-day course. And again, very much with a slant on what does that mean from a PMO individual. So yeah, there is a course for that. Or just for those of you who the rest of the services that we deliver around PMO, we do support organisations. As I said, we've worked with some organisations to help embed some of these principles, but we also do one-to-one coaching. So very often we coach individual PMO analysts if they're setting up a service, or we coach PMO managers and supporting them kind of set up and establish their PMOs. And we've got the analyst course running in the next week. We've got our Lean Agile PMO course running in November, and we've got an assurance course running the beginning of December. And as I said, the governance course is the week after. So if you've got any other kind of requirements, want to know some specific detail, or even want a tailored course, our trainers are kind of have a broad knowledge of PMOs, and therefore we can kind of tailor certifications and training to suit. Do get in touch, either give us a ring or contact us, or go and find us on our website. We'd love to have a chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you,
I hope you
Eileen.
find it useful. Thanks a lot. Good to see you all.